branch stack. The second company, Nidhi, I would like to call the founders on stage. Big round of applause, guys.
Hello. So we're Nyanadi. Today in India, for an MSME to resolve a dispute, it takes about 600 days. A while ago, it was about 1,400. But now, through a lot of effort, we've got to 600. We want to bring that down to 60. And that's basically our entire stack. Now, how we do it is preemptively we start and ensure that we're at the enterprise data level so that dispute tracking and discovery occurs on day -1. We have partner law firms across the country, and with today's stack, we're able to automate about 90% of the litigation argument flow itself. And we've been live for about 2 years. The High Court is a client. Last month, the government of Karnataka processed about 350 cases through us. For example, what we actually end up delivering for a business is for lending institutions, we help them recover twice as better. Insurance companies get about 2 quarters heads up in actually figuring out what litigation is coming towards them because we track crime report data and everything around whatever leads to insurance claims. Lastly, for construction arbitrations, where we have clients who have about lakhs of pages of files, effectively we're able to do discovery on day -1. Now, our thesis is very, very simple. We think that any move in court changes the entire state space of available options for other folks. If I take action X, that just means that my opponent can take only 4 more actions, and that really changes how people end up litigating. And that's a deep, deep indic AI problem where we're able to train models to actually reason at court level and court strategies. And that is basically how we do it. Now, why we say that we can actually crunch down time of dispute resolution itself is because a model that can figure out every path or what path to take in court can also figure out whether an applicable path itself can be ruled in a specific way. And that implies that you might at some point have an AI judge. That's about it. And our thesis is fairly simple again. Any event in society can be framed into a question of law. That's basically what courts do. Courts figure out what question of law to answer. But with an AI judge, as long as you have a large space of questions of law, you can figure out whether it applies to any given case.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Uh, we would also like to thank Ankur Capital Fund for investing 32.7 crores to support two startups. First, I would like to call the folks at Turium. They're developing a compute platform.
Yeah, sure. It doesn't show up the screen.
Guys, can you? It's
Sorry.
working.
Oh, thank you so much. I know it's been a long, set of presentations. I do find it fantastic that there's so many customers in the room for us. We are a very simple company. We make GPUs. We make GPUs for inference. Our clear value prop is we are 5 to 10x better than NVIDIA in terms of performance per watt. We also have a booth at Hall 1, 1.16. Please to visit us. We are demonstrating Quen, GWAN, and all those CUDA models over there, right? Our vision for AI computers, data center AI inference would drive almost 10x more volumes than in training. So think about it, almost 1.2 to 1.5 trillion has been spent on training in the last 5 years. Training is the means, inference is the business. So technically, you need to generate almost 10 trillion worth of value to go ahead and justify the amount of capex that has gone into training, right? So that's the vision, and you see that the world is changing right now with NVIDIA buying Grok, one of the companies I work for. We also believe open source models. We have a slide to actually show you that how open source models are getting very close to closed source models, almost like 10% on the efficiency side, especially on the models which are less than 70 billion parameters, not the trillion parameters model. Sovereign AI is one thing I think which everybody talks about, and I think you need to own the entire stack because the GPU stack is very different. Wow, that's fast. Okay. Quickly on the team, me and Parag went to Kharagpur. He went to Stanford. We worked at Grok, AMD, and stuff. Praveen went to UIUC, and he was at AMD and Intel, running the entire AMD stack for ROCm. Shomi, a software architect, he's from IIT Delhi and AMD and Qualcomm. This is basically 5x flops better, best in class information software, CUDA free kernels, and open architecture, software defined. That's all we are. Thank you. Oh, yeah, this one. Come visit our booth. We have some interesting demos.
Thank you so much, Turiam. The next company we have is Craftif.ai. Uh, yes, please come. I'll open the slide for you. You have you have 2 minutes.
Hi everyone, my name is Pratik Sharda. I'm the founder and CEO at Craftify. The vision for us at Craftify is to shape the future of embedded software development with the help of agentic AI platform, deliver smart device seamless end-to-end solutions. Um, the problem statement that we're trying to tackle here is that the software development that bunch of you would have heard during this forum on the IoT devices computer vision platform is difficult, time-taking, expensive to build. Whether it's via firmware development for an IoT device, which works with a lot of driver or nuances for every different chip, which creates a lot of, takes a high development time to be able to make one set of firmware. Similarly, on the high-end devices like a robot, drone, AI camera, there's a model that you have to build, you have to deploy on edge. Then there's data drift issues which happens. So how do you manage bunch of these parameters? Something that we are trying to figure out with the help of agentic model and give this platform to a embedded engineer who can use this across different forums. So this some bit on problem statement. What we have built is a Craftify Orbita agentic AI based software development suite that automates the entire development flow for embedded edge IoT devices. It constitutes three key products in the overall suite. One is PipeGen that generates, deploys hardware optimized perception pipelines for edge devices. We are live with NVIDIA Jetson and the other edge device as well. FormGen is something that generates a hardware optimized code for microcontrollers and IoT devices. We are live with ESP32 and ST microcontroller on this one. Agentic is something that generates FPGA designs and deployment ready bit streams. So with these three products in the mix, we are able to complete the entire embedded suite. The results have been fascinating when we have deployed this with the early enterprises and OEMs. We were able to save 70% of their development costs, reducing 10-member team to a 2-member team,
Thank you so much,
5x
Pratik.
fast tracking of the timelines, and superior quality production code.
Thank you so much, Pratik.
Thank you so much.
Next, let's hear it for Antler Innovation Fund 1, which has made a total investment of 21.8 crores across a few startups. Please welcome Armory, one of their investments. They are building counter drone solutions.
Hi everyone. We are all seeing what is happening in Ukraine and Russia, and I mean clearly drones are the future of warfare. A $500 drone can go and damage billions of dollars of worth of assets. Something similar happened in Russia where they damaged $7 billion of aircrafts. We have seen it firsthand in Operation Sindoor. That was our first drone war. That is just the trailer, and this is how it's going to go, going forward. Nations are scrambling to fight this enemy. They are going to spend hundreds of billions of dollars in the next 10 years. India itself will be spending $2 billion in next 3 years to buy counter drone systems. So what are we doing about it? I am an aerospace engineer from IIT Bombay. 18 years back, uh, I had pioneered India's drone revolution as a founding member of IdeaForge, which is the first drone defense company in India. Went public. But today I'm on a new mission to build India's defense against the very drones that I helped build earlier. We have built an AI engine which can do real-time processing of radio signals through which we can detect drones and classify them. Using this as a foundation, we have built a product called Surge, which can detect drones at 5 kilometers and then jam them at 3 kilometers away. In a very short span of time, we have done incredible progress. We have secured 100 crores worth of orders from Ministry of Defense. That's our vision, and
Thank you
let's keep
so
it
much,
going.
Armory. A big thank you to Piper Serica for their 34 for investing 34 crores for this cause. Let's welcome Ubik Edge on stage. So, founders, we have one. Oh, I'm taking more screen time than the founders at this point. There you go, sir. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Prasad Patel, CEO and founder of Ubicage. So India is the world's largest physical AI laboratory. Of course, 1.4 billion people, massive infrastructure, but then AI needs ground truth. Okay. So when we look at AI and IoT, there are three stakeholders: tech creators, companies like us, system integrators who have deep sector expertise, be it water, be it energy, be it metal, and then field engineers. Now, talking about field engineers, they're afraid of coding, anything near to coding. System integrators, they have ideas but then can't deploy and depend on tech creators. So there's a massive bottleneck between tech creators and system integrators and fear amongst field engineers. This is what we are solving. We have created an AIoT OS infra, AI engine, a cloud platform called Samas, and a hardware platform called Cleon. Just write prompts in Hindi, English. The devices get auto-coded, the dashboards get created, and the solutions get deployed. So now instead of 15, 20 use cases, we are deploying 5,000 plus use cases. So just to clear it out, we have 25,000 plus deployments. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Ubik Edge.
So, so I think we are done with most of the pitches. I'd really appreciate all the proactive support we got from the venture ecosystem and the founders to make this pitch fest possible. I'd like to give a final round of applause for both the VCs and the founders who have made this possible, and uh, the entire mighty staff, especially Dr. Mr. Abhishek Singh, Paneer Selvam, and everybody for making this happen. Thank you. Thank you all.
For the AI for social good cause, can I request the jury and all the 10 startups to assemble outside? We'll announce the winners outside since we've run out of time here. Everyone on this side.
May I request all the jury members for the market access track and the special guests to kindly assemble outside MR6, the gate where the Honorable Minister had entered. There it's.
You may use back gates also.
So
And thank you all for being here today. I am Rushali Savan. I work at SAS, where I get to work at the intersection of AI ethics, governance, and social impact. And I'm thrilled to be part of this panel today. We are here because the stakes couldn't be much higher. You must have seen with the amount of enthusiasm that is outside, and it is rightly translated into the economic impact that is going to do. About $15.7 trillion are going to be pumped into the global economy by 2030 due to AI. Okay. 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 Yeah. But here is the real truth. The wealth that is going to be generated, it's not going to be distributed evenly. With Latin America getting only 3% of the share, South Africa, Africa, Oceania, and other Asian nations getting only 8%. But here is what the crucial thing is. The global south, the countries in Africa, Latin America, Asia, are the ones who have the majority of the youth population, right? And they have a distinct advantage. We have the distinct advantage of designing for cleaner, more sustainable, and more equitable AI systems by inculcating the principles of responsible AI while we are building it. So we are at an advantage a lot. And that's what recoding the AI economy means. It is about building the AI systems that are reflecting the values of our society. And we are fortunate enough to have a panel over here coming across from the US, Africa, UK, India, and they're full of this great vision and thoughts about how the global majority, especially the global south, can build these systems which are more responsible. Let's dive in. I'm going to give a quick introduction of the panel over here. We have Reggie Townsend. He is the Vice President of AI Ethics, Governance, and Social Impact at SAS, leading the global practice focused on ensuring AI systems are designed for human empowerment and equity. Next, I have Rachel Adams. She is the CEO and founder of Global Center on AI Governance and a senior fellow at the University of Cambridge. And her expertise is in the intersection of AI, geopolitics, and human rights. Third, I'm delighted to welcome Ambassador Philip Thigo. He has come down all the way from Kenya here. It's an honor for us to have you on the panel. He is the special envoy for technology to the President of Republic of Kenya and was appointed by the UN Secretary General to the High-Level Advisory Board on Artificial Intelligence. Welcome, Philip. And I'm delighted to have Mr. Kazim Rizvi here on the panel. He is the founding director of the Dialogue, which is the India's leading tech policy think tank, and founder of Core AI, the Coalition for Responsible Evolution of AI in India. Thank you, Kazim. Today's discussion is grounded into the report which we worked with Rachel's organization to, and which is known as From Capability to Constraint. There is a QR code on the screen which you can take a look at the report, and our discussions is to be grounded on that. Kicking off the first segment of our discussion, there are in total 4 segments to this particular panel. The first one being AI literacy, talent, opportunity. How can we build the capacity in the global south, and how can we position global south as the leader in AI literacy? So across the global south, when I came here and I saw the enthusiasm, the demographics that is interested in knowing what AI is and how can it help for the social empowerment, it is amazing. That's the energy is just awesome, right? And there are numbers to prove that About 80% of Indonesian, 77% of Thai believe AI will be more beneficial than harmful, right? But we have to keep in mind without the baseline literacy around AI, we need they need to be in a position where they can question this AI systems which are going to be used to make decisions about their credit, about their jobs, about their health, right? So how can we make sure that we are in a position as a global south to make the right decisions of AI literacy? And keeping that thing in mind, my first question is to Reggie. Reggie, you work at a major tech company which is expanding the AI literacy programs through public private partnerships, right? And the data shows that there is great optimism, like I mentioned, some numbers there, how people are excited about this new technology. How can we design the literacy programs that can go beyond just, oh, AI is present or awareness, to actual capacity building with equipping our citizens, policymakers, organizations, general public, so that they can question why the AI is making the decisions, why the AI is being the way it is used. Is it the technology for the sake of technology, or is it creating an impact? Right. The Going back to the core of the summit here. So, what does that deeper level of AI literacy require?
So that's a good question, Rashali, and thank you. Good afternoon. So no, it should not be technology for technology's sake. Let's just get that part out. I know there's a lot of ambition and excitement around pursuing AI. Okay, so what does that mean in your individual jobs, roles as father, mother, cousins, etc.? And the truth is, it means something a little bit different in each of those varying capacities. I had the privilege of serving on our National AI Advisory Committee back in the U.S., where we provided recommendations to the White House on matters associated with AI, and I actually authored the AI literacy, helped to co-lead the recommendations of the president on that. And one of the things that we found was that there's in the U.S.
We will be
and more broadly
able
around the
to
globe, there tends to be a misunderstanding about what AI is, right? There's this trend toward generative AI as the only AI, which is a falsehood. Good AI, but not the only AI. And there's also a lack of fundamental understanding around the what I would call the AI life cycle, which goes something like data, models, deployment, and so one of the things that we really wanted to drive home was that we've got to use the kind of a best of breed approach where government being the great convener that it is, the ability to coordinate activities, industry being the great creators that we are, but then the academy and civic organizations being the great targeters of markets that they are. You really have to bring all of those components together in this public-private partnership. And again, the goal is not to teach people AI. It's great if people want to become AI engineers and data scientists. We need more of those, but we also need poets. We also need entertainers and fishermen and farmers, right? And so the underlying AI lifecycle curriculum, which basically says have a good understanding for how data is accumulated, whether or not it is provided with informed consent, right? Those sorts of things. Have an understanding of the kinds of algorithms that are driving decisions. Again, not at the data scientist level. Not everyone needs to know what a Bayesian network is, but just the fundamental understandings that there's a decision being made that could impact you, that then gets deployed for action out in the world. And it could be your action or it could be the action of an agent these days. But the point here is just that foundational understanding is the important piece. I draw the parallel to electricity, right? Most of us aren't engineers and know all of the nuances of power generation, but we all know that if we have a iron or a refrigerator or a laptop, we can plug it in and get the power that we need. And so we need the same basic understanding when it comes to AI, and you've got to have these this kind of multi-stakeholder approach to provide that level of information where it needs to be provided. Because if you just leave it to industry, we're going to train you on what our product does really well. But I don't think that that will serve broader society as best as it possibly can.
Those are some wonderful insights, Reggie. And I think you made a point. One, technology for technology's sake. That's definite no. And the way that AI literacy has to be done is by taking that multi-stakeholder approach. That is very important. And no one, like, it's not required that everyone knows all the technicalities behind it, but then the basic workings of it. And I like the parallel that you draw between electricity. And I think we all can relate to that. Coming back on the policy side of things over here. So my question is to Ambassador Thigo. We have seen African nations in Kenya, they are experimenting with a lot of local AI related projects, right? And we have that window of opportunity where we can build that AI capacity. So, what are some of the policy structure that needs to be in place to ensure that these initiatives not remain local but scale, right? And what are some of the gaps that you see with what government is doing and with what actually is needed to help with the scaling of these wonderful projects that have been going on?
Thank you so much once again, and thank you to the Global Center for Governance for putting this together. I think the truth is that, especially if you look at the Global South, a lot of us were brought into the AI conversation from a policy perspective, whether it was data protection policies or whether it was the AI strategies. And so I think, and sometimes I become very honest to say that we never walked into this. We were basically dragged into this conversation. And so there's almost a mismatch with the extent of how then we needed to kind of look back and say, how do we make AI work for the African continent, at least for Africa? And so I think some of us have been very clear around how do we ensure that AI is inclusive. And so to your global nature and scale nature is why countries like mine were very much emphatic in getting the United Nations around artificial intelligence. So you've seen we've basically negotiated the first ever UN resolution on AI, which was very clear around safe, secure, and trustworthy AI for sustainable development. We were very clear in terms of coining that resolution to that extent, because an AI must be for sustainable development, not just AI for AI's sake, and I agree with you. The second part, of course, was then how do you ensure that beyond a resolution that it becomes very practical? So again, we negotiated the Global Digital Compact, ensuring that we have a compact that everybody agrees on, including private sector, to ensure that AI delivers, yes, for public good, but also brings real incremental economic gain, especially for countries that are not AI rich. The third part, of course, you've seen is the science, right? And that's why I always love Rachel's work around this, right? And you've seen the Secretary General 2 weeks ago has announced the panel. So part of my work in the H Lab, but also in our negotiations, was to ensure that we have a scientific panel, so that and that scientific panel is independent and globally representative, so that also the science from the global south also informs AI and AI development, including risks, opportunities. Then the fourth pillar for that was, because the technology changes very quickly, you needed to have an inclusive mechanism for dialogue. And so I agree with my colleague when he says, part of the challenge that has always been around artificial intelligence is the conversation has always been with the technical folks. I think everybody, because this is a general purpose technology like electricity, we don't have to be electricians, but I have an iron box, I turn on the bulb. People need to be fluent. So I'll add always before literacy, fluency, right? That we need to be fluent to understand the impact of this technology, because at the end of the day, people need to be able to make decisions that matter in their own lives in this era of intelligence. So when you talk then about a policy posture, that needs to be the posture. That the posture is not about regulations and guardrails. It needs to be about knowledge and people's capability to make decisions, especially when intelligence is a currency. Because we focus a lot on the stack, right? Data, compute, talent, but not the end product, which is intelligence. And I always believe, including global south countries, that no one in this era should be forced to outsource their intelligence. Because for me, that's about sovereignty. And in most cases, for people like us, it's about freedom. and self-emancipation. So we cannot have this new colonialism to the extent in the era of intelligence.
That is one of the deepest things that I've heard. So, and I like that you tied to sustainable development and the economic growth, because we have to keep in mind the for what purpose of AI, right? So, what are we trying to achieve in the end by using AI? Is it just, oh, I want to speed up some of the productivity, or I need to make some real changes that actually affect most of the communities? So, yeah, and definitely policy has a part to play, not from the regulation standpoint, but then to foster that innovation and actually give direction on the purpose for which the AI has to be used. So, thank you. Moving on to our next segment of the discussion, it is about closing the digital divide, right? When we talk about infrastructure and some of the data gaps. And I think people that are sitting in the audience would definitely understand what I'm going to speak here. So let's kick that segment here. AI runs on connectivity. We just heard about electricity and internet and all the storage, compute, and whatnot. Although nearly 3 billion people in the global south are offline, only 35% have internet access in the developing nations versus 80% in advanced economies. Now, countries in Africa that hold 18% of the world population but have less than 1% of the global data center capacity. Now, what is AI without data, right? And what is when we talk about sovereign data and whatnot? So, that's an important point. Languages. Now, that's a near and dear topic to my heart. There are 7,000 languages in this globe, but only a handful of them were used to train these models that we are looking at, right? There are a lot of dialects that are spoken in these global south nations. Now, there are data gaps. When you're building these foundation models and not representing the entire 3 billion plus population over there, then how are we trying to develop this AI that is inclusive, right? So, my question to Rachel, because of your experience on working with this responsible AI frameworks, right? Most of this responsible AI frameworks at this moment we have seen coming from the global north, right? Now the global north countries like US, Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. But the global responsible index that you are documenting based on your research in the governance leadership, you see emergent patterns from Africa, from India, from Kenya. So just wanted you to shed some light, like what are some of the actual learnings from this approaches that could reshape the global standards from a global south perspective, and how can global south become one of the leaders in setting examples for this responsible AI frameworks?
Thank you, Vishali, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here this afternoon. I know there's many competing events, so thank you for being with us here. I think your question is very pertinent. I think the kind of quick answer is that global majority governments are already leading the way in defining responsible AI in its own terms. And I think this summit is a very, very good example of that, where we've moved from narrow ideas around safety, and we know these issues are fundamentally important, to much broader, much more inclusive issues about what's the societal impact we want artificial intelligence to have. And I think in some way this defines the kind of global majority approach to responsible AI and AI governance. We don't see global south or global majority countries localizing norms that were established in the global north. What we see is them starting from a very, very different standpoint, where right from the beginning they're thinking about critical issues around sovereignty, and sovereignty doesn't just mean kind of control over compute resources or control over the infrastructure. It means, does the state have the capacity to protect the rights of its citizens when they may be at threat, or where there may be an opportunity to use a technology to advance them in really kind of new and transformative ways. So I think what we're seeing is a different starting point for Southern governments that are not just thinking about how is AI going to increase industrial growth? How is it going to be a new national asset for us as a country? But rather, how can we use this technology to advance our developmental priorities, to add public value? And how do we think about those kind of critical infrastructure and foundational issues like connectivity, like in building equitable representative data sets right from the beginning. So I think this is a really exciting area for identifying precisely where we're already seeing Southern leadership. So India, for example, has put digital public infrastructure squarely on the map as a kind of fundamental to advancing equitable AI outcomes. In Senegal, for example, they've developed policy responses to AI that have centered women and girls' education in STEM, thinking about these kind of issues of responsible AI leadership from an equitable perspective from a pipeline position, which is much more kind of thinking through questions of societal resilience. And then the last thing, and I mentioned this in a panel this morning, in low resource contexts, and we see this with innovation generally, where there is restraint and restriction, innovation actually comes out in more exciting ways. So global south governments that face kind of resource constraints and often limited regulatory capacity are approaching AI governance from different perspectives around public-private partnerships, and Reggie's spoken well to this, or to kind of adaptive public procurement frameworks. So what we're seeing is the global south is developing these ways of approaching AI governance that is agile from the get-go, that is agile and flexible from the get-go, and so is able to respond much better to changing technological advances and emerging new capabilities. So for me, I think we're seeing the global south kind of expanding what responsible AI means from the get-go.
That is wonderful. And one thing, one theme, if I could take from what you've said, is resilience, right? And the way the technology is moving, the pace of it, and the the issues that we face in the global south, how are we resilient enough to develop our technology to solve the problems? And that's why, which is what is helping frame those governance frameworks. So thank you for that. Now I will bring Kazim into the discussion over here. And India is a fascinating case study. There's I'm just fascinated always, every time I visit. And again, a near and dear question to my heart. India has so many languages. You take Hindi, Marathi, Tamil, Telugu. There are hundreds of millions of speakers, right? But they are underrepresented in many AI training data sets. Now, there are initiatives from Indian government related to Bhashini AI to make sure that we have that robust data sets available in those languages, right? And I potentially see there will be a lot of innovation in this area to create AI that will cater to the needs of that population. Against this backdrop, what it would take institutionally, technically, and collaboratively, because we are talking a lot about multi-stakeholder approaches here, to help speed up India's sovereign AI related ambitions, build that is built on the data that is local, technology that is local, and the languages that can represents the need of the people.
Thank you, Vishali. Thank you to SAS for sort of doing this event. So I think few issues I want to just bring over here. One is that you spoke about languages, and India has more than 20 recognized constitution recognized languages, more than 100, 100 200 different type of dialects, and different regions speak different type of dialects as well as you move across the country. So I think number one, it's imperative that we have large language models which cater to the needs of Indian languages. And to do that, we should look at the use case of digital public infrastructure, because we already have proven expertise in terms of building population scale digital systems like Aadhaar, like UPI, ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce. So we need to look at the AI data infrastructure in a similar manner, right? Which means, you have to have sectoral data trust in, let's say, healthcare, finance, agriculture, consent-based public data sets, maybe like a national AI data repository as well. Government is sort of putting a lot of efforts towards those data sets. The AI coach is one effort. You spoke about Bhashini, right? So we need to have these data sets for languages in terms of having the technical infrastructure available, which is the open network, and a network of data sets which basically complies with the same procedures as it is in the digital public infrastructure. So that's on the infrastructure side. Um, I think the number two is on building large language models, foundation models, on which can work, let's say, in Marathi, Tamil, Hindi, Bengali, and other languages. And the 12 startups that have been selected by the ministry are working towards also multilingual models. We are already looking at Sarvam, which is building India's large language model, and looking to have multiple languages. You can sort of, if you want to use it in Hindi or any other languages, you can. So there is already effort which is taking place to develop full foundation models in multiple Indian languages, because as you said, I the language data set, the multilinguality is not represented in the Western large language models. And I think that's where Indian large language models will have an edge, because they will be able to cater into multiple languages. And I think that richness and diversity in the languages will help the models to sort of perform. And we already know that Sarvam is, some of the benchmark results are on the level of Gemini, OpenAI's tool as well, and some of the benchmarks may also be sort of beating these legacy models, right? So we are already there in terms of Indian expertise. So yeah, language inclusion in democratic infrastructure is very, very important. I think the third point is around compute sovereignty, and I would like to emphasize AI diffusion is critical towards building, India's local large language model ecosystem. And of course, it's important to ensure that countries like India get access to GPUs, to CPUs, to TPUs, to facilitate the growth of AI, but at the same time also optimize it to the need. So, India is going to be the use case capital of application layer softwares. So for that, different compute requirements are there. We are already building LLMs for that. Level of compute requirements are there. I think SLMs are the way forward as well, with limited compute. So I also want to caution towards this talk that, okay, do we need to compete with Western counterparts on compute? Or are we able to be agile and clever in terms of ensuring what we have we can maximize? Yes and no to that question. I think it's a balance in terms of ensuring that we optimize our compute requirements to the needs of the country. And then let's see how these models perform. And I think going forward, definitely it'll be important to have infrastructure which caters to the Gen AI startups, and we already have 300 Gen AI startups in India. So for these multilingual models to to work at scale, it's important to have that level of compute infrastructure. So I think these three, 4 points are, in my opinion, important in terms of ensuring India is, able to scale up, provide a good use case for the rest of the world. And we also invite, I mean, we already have the leading model developers building for India, and we invite them to localize in Indian languages as well, right? So I think that's it's going to be a rich competition, and it's great for the consumers.
Yeah, definitely. And I think once we have that example set up in the global south, the other countries are also doing the same, like Swahili LM is getting developed in Africa and whatnot. And you pointed out rightly, you need data. So data is going to be very crucial for building the models that are more inclusive, because if we don't have uh, representation in the data of the population you're trying to serve, then it becomes a challenge for build the AI systems. Moving on to our next section is around the governance. Now, I know when I say the word governance, some might say that, oh, is it like going to stifle my innovation? Is it going to slow down my innovation? But I like to think governance in a different way. It would actually allow and give direction to innovation and rather assist innovation rather than stifle it. On that note, we have some statistics to share. There are 40% of the countries in the entire globe are making investments in trustworthy AI through governance, where they're building ethical standards and guardrails and safeguards, right? And we see that the global south is rapidly rewriting this playbook. Africa's 2024 Continental AI Strategy, it launched about $60 billion Pan-African AI Fund and embedded ethics into the entrepreneurship itself. What an example. While India is also looking at mosaic of existing law with the DPDP Act, AI Act, to govern without stifling innovation. Latin America is moving towards a risk-based framework. So what you see over here isn't just a conversion into single model, but a multipolar governance landscape where global south is not a passive player, but it has its own voice, right? Keeping that in mind, I have my question to Reggie. The report that we just shared, it emphasizes the public private partnership as central to building that governance, like connecting the innovation needs to the local needs that Kazim just mentioned. But there is an inherent tension. Companies often prefer light touch regulation to move fast because, oh, everyone wants to move fast. Why not? How can companies approach that balance? And what incentives will actually drive companies to invest in trustworthy AI governance without seeing it as just a compliance exercise?
Look, I'm going to tie something back to what Kazim said. I think it's hilarious. I don't know if you even noticed you refer to OpenAI as having legacy models. Now, mind you, this is a company that has released a model all of not even 5 years ago. 5 years. So why does it matter? Since then, there's been I don't know how many new, you know. And so the question about governance versus innovation, I find it's a hilarious question, largely because we start with this premise that scaling our judgment, which is, by the way, how I refer to as governance, is somehow the antithesis of innovating, right? Um, Here's the parallel, right? We have a 50-year-old company. Talk about legacy, right? We've been in the AI ML space for that long, right? We've learned a lot along the way. We've made some mistakes along the way. Probably not a good idea to repeat those, right? And so governance allows us to avoid repeating those mistakes. It allows us to take the judgment that we've derived, the wisdom that we've derived over those years, and embed it in our processes, in our policies, in our products, and in our people, right? So the problem with this whole conversation that we've been having, specific to generative AI, really, has been about we just have to go fast so that we can win the race. The race to where? Where are we going? Right? What's the purpose? And until someone describes for me that we're going to do something other than create a digital god, I just assume we just slow down where it makes sense to slow down. We have to get comfortable with the idea that friction is sometimes a feature. It's okay sometimes to slow down in pursuit of purpose. So let's define the purposes. Let's understand what the intended uses are. Let's understand who we're trying to motivate, who we're trying to sell, etc. What the potential harms might be to them as well as secondary and tertiary actors. And then let's mitigate accordingly. That's all governance is. We spend a lot of time, refer to my job with doing the work with the White House, just thinking about different regulatory schema. We can regulate with speeding tickets, that's regulation, right? We can regulate with licensure, right? A clinician has to go get licensed. We can regulate by saying thou shalt not, right? This is a prohibited use. Right? So there are various ways that we can do it. Companies regulate all the time. They're called policies, right? We tell our employees what they can and cannot do all the time. This is not new to corporate America, and you learn that over the course of a little bit of time in the space.
That's something that you have given me to chew on. And to summarize, I would say for what purpose, to what end, for whom it might fail. That's the gist of the governance aspect of the thing that we are trying to discuss here. Uh, I have another question for Ambassador Thigo. I just mentioned the African Union's 2024 continental AI strategy, which was significant, like having that $60 billion pumped into for the ethical entrepreneurship in AI, right? The challenge of some of the frameworks that and the funding is one thing, but the implementation part is the other. Now, what do you see are the critical gap between the strategy part and what is actually necessary to implement this governance that is meaningful at a national level when countries are trying to hassle the other problems already existing? So, where do you see the gap between the strategy versus implementation when it comes to governance in AI?
I wish I could answer that fully. It's 54 countries. I think in terms of just overall, a kind of a cursory analysis of how we approach it as Kenya. I think one is that we have to complete the unfinished business. And the unfinished business is 600 million Africans still do not have electricity and are not connected to the grid. We've seen the numbers around internet connectivity. We know for sure that there is beyond just electric grid, there's an energy challenge just in terms of the consumption of AI on energy. We know for sure that Africa only has, I think, 0 point something percent of compute of the world and only 1% of data center capacity. So again, there's a big infrastructural challenge. So as much as we're thinking about, so we have a legacy challenge, but also we have sort of a current challenge around how to invest in AI capability. The second part, of course, and I look at the strategy and I think it's fine because it's to the extent that it's very aspirational around African values. And I think sometimes we want to govern technology from a technology lens. I think from the AU, we came from a Pan-African value in terms of safety, security, inclusivity, sustainability, and building public trust. I think those are the 5 pillars. If you summarize the strategy, it's really not about technology. It's about technological impact or potential impact on society, but also creating opportunity for Africans. So we didn't approach AI from a fear perspective. We approach it from a potential capability that the continent needs to wield. But then part of, I think, to answer your question, one is that I think the challenge for me is that we are still applying the old rules into this new, very uncertain and very transitory period. And I think for me, that's the biggest challenge. So the biggest challenge for me is leadership. Is how do we recontour our leadership to understand that this technology is not ICT. It is not. And that's a challenge I see. So unless we begin to have this mindset shift, that people understand that this is a little bit different. You need everybody. You need ministers of finance, minister of planning, not just minister of ICT. And not to get me wrong, believe me, everywhere you walk into, you'll meet an African minister of ICT. That for me fundamental in this conference. That for me fundamental is a problem that you need. Or beyond the leaders one, you'll just get ICT folks, right? So I think for me, you need to do that. The second part, of course, is very much around the people. I mean, how do we ensure that we build capacity and capability and fluency so that it's this is the biggest resource that the African continent has. Median age of 19.7. We don't own compute. We definitely have a challenge with data and data caps. We don't have the infrastructure, we don't have electricity, but what we have is a talent. So how do we begin to build that? And that can happen very quickly. And so again, the second point for me is that how do we ensure from K1 to K12 to university to tertiary education that we have AI plus, not just AI. It's if you're doing medicine, you also have some fluency around AI. If you're doing, so it's the other way around. It's not to try to get everybody to be a data scientist and a coder and a machine learning expert. It's actually the other way around. And I think finally is this finance gap. And I know you hinted at it with the $60 billion. I honestly do not believe there's $60 billion available. I don't think so. I'm one of person who's been very skeptical about that figure. But I think it's to the extent to understand that it's not about, again, this is an old rules mindset, right? So throw money at a problem and think you solve it. If you did 60 billion last year, believe me, it's different this year. It's probably gone up, right? And myself and Strive, my CEO, just negotiated 12,000 GPUs from NVIDIA for the entire African continent. Think about it. 12,000 GPUs at $1 billion. Not much, right? And so what is this 60 billion? So I think there's sort of a resource challenge, but also a resource mindset that you need to plan differently when it comes to AI, right? So it's not about a pot. It's about look at the whole of society and reimagine our entire budget to understand what investments do you need to put in talent and the education system, what investment do you need to put in infrastructure, what investment do you need to put in electricity, in connectivity, in the use cases. And that is where I want to land this plane. Ultimately, it will be about AI solving problems. Food systems, health systems, education and learning outcomes, judiciary and justice, climate and climate action. So I think for me, that's where we need to figure out just beyond the nice documents that we do.
And that is the kind of and thank you, Ambassador Figo. That was the kind of thinking and the deep level of thinking. I think the common theme that I heard from all the 3 points that you made here is the mindset, and which we can get through the culture, right? The culture aspect of it to then leapfrog into these governance framework and make that implementation happen. So thank you for that. Now, back to Rachel. Uh, you have done a lot of work with AI governance globally, right? And this document has shown from the research that you have done that is a lot of different nations are taking different approaches. Africa has a flexible approach, Latin America has binding laws, Asia's have mixed models. They are still thinking what to be done in the AI governance rather than converging into one gold standard, like one size fits all when it comes to governance. How do you ensure that these different plural governance frameworks that you have are going to help in binding or fragmenting the AI governance, and what role you see Global South will play in this multilateral standards that are being getting developed across?
Yeah, thank you. And I think this question is particularly interesting given the kind of multipolar moment we are in globally. I think the first thing we might want to say is that pluralism may very well be desirable at a global level. We need to remember that AI governance is emerging within very different political traditions and in context with very different regulatory needs. And you've just listed some of them. So expecting a kind of single global framework ignores the fact that governance systems are very much embedded in particular histories and particular political economies. One of the things we also need to think about is when we are looking for these areas of convergence and we're looking for promoting interoperability, we're not just promoting that whoever has the most dominant hand, everybody else must adhere to that particular set of standards. We know from evaluations work that doesn't work. With large language models and the kind of way in which they are deployed and diffused throughout society, evaluation benchmarks set in the global north or in one particular country and context may mean very little when it comes to effectiveness, appropriateness, and safety somewhere else. So I think we need to be thinking about global governance from a kind of layered perspective, where we have a set of shared norms around accountability, transparency, human oversight, and safety, of course, that enables kind of cross-border engagement with these systems. But on top of this layer, countries need to be allowed the space to develop diverse frameworks that respond to their own particular regulatory requirements from this kind of outcomes perspective, which may be in some countries labor markets. Different countries have different unique kind of strengths and opportunities, and countries need to be able to kind of capitalize on that. We also need to recognize that historically, multilateral processes and standard setting has been dominated by the players that have the time and the resources to invest the most in them. Right? So, what we want to be seeing is Global South actors defining what accountability might look like in resourced, constrained contexts. And we need to be thinking there about who's involved in those conversations and how we're involving publics who need to be able to seek redress where harms occur. We also need to be looking at this kind of middle power engagement, and now is particularly that moment where we are seeing middle powers united by a same trajectory. They're not building frontier technologies, they're adopting AI for their own development priorities or their own kind of economic imperatives. And then lastly, we need to recognize that the legitimacy of global governance doesn't come through consensus but from diversity, and that having that diversity and pluralism effectively enables or allows for resilience. Thank you.
Oh, that is wonderful, and I think the last statement that you made about the diversity and the pluralism to eventually get to the global governance frameworks, that just sums it all, and building in resilience. Moving on to the last segment of our discussion, and we just talked, Ambassador Thigo just mentioned about sustainability, right? We are using all these data centers, compute, storage, network, and we have only one small Earth. And we are trying to utilize all these resources. So our next section is going to be around how can we build a more sustainable AI and adoption moving ahead, right? And how the global south has that second mover advantage in it. Just to give some context around data centers and how much of energy it is consuming. Data centers are consuming around 400 plus terawatt of hours of electricity just in 2024, and that is just 1.5% of the global use of electricity. Now, training a single large language model emits as much as carbon dioxide as I would take 300 flights from New York to San Francisco. That's the scale of amount of electricity that we are using to build a single large language model. Yet, the global south, which has the second mover advantage, they can build this infrastructure, they can take a stab at building the renewable first data center approach, right? They can deploy edge-based AI and potentially embrace the SLM, that is the small language model for context specific tasks rather than just building one huge and consuming all those resources especially when we are resource constrained. So my question in this light is to Kazim. How do you feel about, how do you think the global south's later arrival in the second mover advantage and how it can avoid the North's mistakes and build more sustainable system from start? Like for example, India has tiny ML approaches which detect these crop diseases. Now, it's a small model detecting and built for a particular purpose, right? So, and thus avoiding consumption of lot of energy. Also using mobile first technology, right? So, what does it actually mean to adopt strategically and to imbibe this sustainability by design when you're designing this AI systems for the future? And specifically in the context of global south, it becomes very important because we are already resource strained.
Thanks you, Vishali. So I think here three principles are important. One, efficiency. Two, frugality. And three, inclusion. And I think you spoke about second mover advantage. First of all, we have to recognize that we cannot make the same mistakes which we did when the industrial revolution started, right? I mean, you saw the Western countries, Britain, etc. They polluted much more than the global south in those days, and of course, now we're looking for a low carbon future. And I think the advantage with global south in the AI age is that we can look for a low carbon AI future, and global south can lead that conversation. Not much time has passed in terms of how global north has been pushing heavy compute hardware and data centers. And you spoke about resources, but even look at land, look at water, look at the impact it has on various aspects um, of any particular geography. So how do we build models which are more efficient and frugal? And I think that's where India is looking to innovate, and that's where I think a lot of our focus is also to ensure that with minimum compute we can achieve maximum output. I do want to highlight something which China has done, I think, with DeepSeek, and we all saw last year when it was released, and they sort of were able to build cutting edge models with lesser compute power required. And I think, for good or for bad, that is something which is important to sort of learn from and see how we can emulate and better that development. Um, on the sustainability part, on the infrastructure and sustainability, I think here it's important that we focus on edge AI, as you spoke about. We focus on optimization of hardware, as I spoke last in my previous intervention as well, and we are able to build in sustainable by design practices right from the beginning when it comes to procurement of hardware, procurement of GPUs or TPUs or CPUs or whatever that may be, and using it in a way that is bringing the best performance. We cannot afford to have the mentality of try and throw, and we cannot afford to have the mentality of just move fast and break things and let's see how it goes. Build one LLM, doesn't work, build another one, but at the same time, it's important that we democratize AI resources. And that is one key element of this conference also. That how do you build an AI diffusion in global south, Africa, India, and you work with global partners to enable local compute access. Because if you don't provide that, eventually what will happen is you will end up in a situation where there will be a large gulf and a divide, which we don't want. Global South is an important market for American big tech companies as well, right? So you cannot ignore and you need to walk that talk and you need to build that momentum, while at the same time it's important for Indian entrepreneurs to focus on efficiency. So it has to be both ways. If you do not have trust, and I think in the climate conversations we see tremendous lack of trust at times, when we talk about differentiated but common responsibilities, or sort of looking at how do we move towards a low carbon future. Different countries have different responsibilities. If we have to move towards a low carbon AI future, then we have to set the terms of reference and the conditions right now. If we do not agree on those terms of conditions or terms of a movement in terms of the scope of the collaboration and what is the terms of moving together, then I think it'll be very difficult because different countries will have different interpretations of what AI diffusion will mean or what compute will mean or what AI sovereignty will mean. I do agree that AI sovereignty is not just about compute, but it's also about security. But at the same time, if sustainability by design will only happen if there is regular access of different levels of compute. It may not be GPUs, it could be TPUs, CPUs as well. So I do talk about resource optimization, but I also talk about access and democratization of resources. So we have to balance it together.
Yeah. Thank you, Kazim. And we'll just wrap it up with one single thought. Uh, I do think that the Global South has a lot of potential, and I hope that the Global South would be positioned as a leader in developing AI that is more trustworthy, resilient, and responsible. And with that, we'll close this session. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for my panelists for being here.